This is the August 1982 issue of Amazing Heroes, issue number 14, originally on sale for $1.95 back in the day, featuring a cover story on the upcoming new DC's hit series. It was already pegged to be a hit, Camelot 3000, and sure enough, it was a big deal, and still is a collected edition to this day that you can pick up somewhere, I'm sure. As usual, I'm not going to go through every page of this issue, but there are some highlights. As you can see, I have some bookmarks in there for what I want to talk about. Starting with this opening two-page spread, I need help from some of the old-timers in the crowd. Portfolios used to be a big thing. A lot of sword and sorcery stuff, a lot of fantasy stuff, sometimes just plain old good superheroic stuff. Publishers, in this case Pacific Comics, would sell, or maybe their Pacific Comics was distributing them, would sell these portfolios where you get 4, 5, 6 pieces of art, I guess on heavy paper in an envelope for sale. Here's 4 incredible black and white plates by Tim Conrad, and here's Fantasy Serenade, which is Chris Miller with his superbly detailed world where magic comes from music and wizards call the tune. $12 for one of the 750 copies that they were making, 6 large plates. Plates being a piece of paper, basically. And you could order them, cut this coupon out, put it in an envelope with a check with the appropriate amount of postage, and they'd send it to you. Whatever happened to portfolios? They ceased to become a thing by, I would guess, the mid to late 80s, but from what I've understood, what I've seen over the years from older comics, maybe they were a thing in the 70s into the early 80s, and then they disappeared. So what happened? Why were they so popular for such a short time? Why did they go away? Just why? If you know, please leave a comment below. I'm just curious about the whole thing. This is a new issue of a new format for Amazing Heroes. I don't have any of the first 13 issues, but originally it was not this comic-sized format. It was a much larger, more of a magazine-sized thing. This is the first time that it's coming up in this smaller format. The opening editorial here talks about how Dwight Decker was supposed to become the editor-in-chief, but at the last minute declined because he was going back to Chicago to pursue his thrilling career as a technical writer for the phone company. In these modern days, when you think technical writer, you think, the guy who's writing the manual or the woman who's writing the manual for a programming language or an application or a software suite or a software as a service kind of thing. But, back in 1982, that would be the phone company you'd be writing for. They also raised the price of the magazine from $1.50 to $1.95. All stuff they talk about in here. That's the opening editorial from Kim Thompson, who was the editor at the time. So let's see what we got going on here. Move ahead to Comics Report. Omega Man, a new series by, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Slifer, and Giffen to debut. This was the debut, along this, I love this, the comic, which will be printed in the same format as Camelot 3000, white Baxter paper, with a cover price of $1, because let me tell you folks, in the early to mid-'80s, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, they were obsessed with paper stock and comics. And for good reason. It was a dividing line between sort of either the higher-end stuff or the stuff that was being created just for the emerging direct market rather than the newsstand. So if you had a slightly more expensive comic on the nicer, whiter paper, not this, newsprint kind of stuff that Amazing Heroes was printed on, it was a big deal. And sure enough, Omega Man was one of those books. Roger Slifer, Keith Giffen, Mike DiCarlo, Marv Wolfman, who co-created the Omega Man with artist Joe Staton in Green Lantern 141, is the editor of the book. This book, of course, being important because the third issue would be the debut of a new character called Lobo. Lobo is not hinted at here in the article, but I just wanted to throw that in. It's kind of fun seeing these, articles from before the big article actually hit, from before the big story. I like this ad here, the universe-shattering conclusion, The Legion of Superheroes number 294, on sale in September. For those of you who are big Legion fans and you are mighty, you will understand the earth-shattering and universe-shattering conclusion of the series that was there. For those of us who didn't read Legion, it's 5 years later, Darkness Saga, one of those things. I'm sure it came out of that. I don't know. Wonder Woman issue 300 here is due to be released soon. It was going to be a big book, a 72-page long issue with a cover price of a whopping $1.50. Sadly, Keith Pollard had to step in. Not sad for Keith Pollard. Sad because he was stepping in because a chapter that was initially slated for George Perez to draw, he didn't have the time to do it, so Keith Pollard stepped in. George Perez would eventually go on to do some other Wonder Woman work in a few years, so don't cry for him. Dalgoda, this was a much hyped book at the time. I don't know much more. I've never read an issue, but there it is. How's this for, this is their news line, this is their news page, the latest short little bits and pieces of which issues are coming in late, which artists are stepping in for who. How about this one for a first liner? Alex Toth handles the art on the 4th chapter of the new Challengers of the Unknown serial, appearing in Adventure Comics Digest. That story will appear in 496. Oh, for the days when you can just call Alex Toth and have him draw a chapter of your book. That's pretty cool. Here's the Marvel merry-go-round, Frank Miller leaving Daredevil. After gradually relinquishing the art chores on Daredevil over a period of time, Frank Miller is leaving entirely with Daredevil 191. That's his last issue as a writer. Klaus Janson will be continuing as the artist. A new writer has yet to be chosen. If you've been following these videos, you'll know that we had a review of Daredevil 200 written by Denny O'Neil that was not positively reviewed at all. Here's a preview page of the upcoming New Mutants graphic novel, which was a big deal for an expansion of the X-Men title, to have a new sort of next generation, the teenagers of the X-Men getting their own book kind of thing. It was a big deal at the time. Unfortunately, the update here was that the book was running late. Delays. As usual, several of Marvel's projects are late. The first issue of Red Sonja has not only been moved back on the schedule, but will feature a reprint story. That's never good. That's the kind of thing that just wouldn't fly today. Could you imagine an issue of just any book being delayed and then it comes out with a reprint of some old issue? That would not fly at all in this day and age. But back then they used to pull that off. Here we see that the New Mutants volume has once again been delayed. Look for it now in late September. We'll get back to that in just a second. Here from Pacific Comics is the exciting news that they're doing a new humor strip called Gru by Sergio Aragonés. It's starting in October. It'll be previewed one last time in Star Slayer in September on issue 5 there. Gru had seen print in a couple of anthologies, I think Funny Animal kind of books, that kind of thing. But this was his ongoing series at Pacific. There's a little, I'll try to zoom in here and get you a decent image of this, but it didn't reprint very well. And it's early Aragonés, so there's what the early image looks like from 1982 of when Gru was first becoming a comic. Here's a fun one. Nexus number 3, the first Flexi comic. A comic book that came with a record. Two thoughts here. First, that would be very, very popular today, one would think. Second, someone at Image was doing this with the book in the last couple of years, and I forget who it was. I think they're actually publishing an actual solid vinyl record that would be included with a comic if you special ordered it in advance. If I find out who that was, I will pop it up on the screen over here somewhere, and we can all laugh at me later for forgetting that one. Here's an ad for the New Mutants, which just says it's coming this fall to a comic store near you. The graphic novel turned out pretty good, I guess, because they had a series that would last 100 issues, before becoming X-Force, of course. And here is the special preview of Camelot 3000 by Peter Sanderson, who, if I'm not mistaken, at one point was a comics librarian or historian for Marvel Comics, if I don't miss my guess there. He wrote this long, multi-page article. This looks like a long-read blog article that you'd see more modern days if there were any blogs left. You got lots of little, preview panels, lots of explanations. He has interviews with both Brian Boland and Mike Barr about the series, the characters of the series, the setup of the series, the creation of the series, all that kind of stuff. It goes on for page after page after page. This is the kind of stuff that I would eat up back in the day. If I were reading these magazines, I would be poring over this thing. And on it goes. The Camelot 3000 Maxi series is intended to conclude with number 12, but if it proves to be a great financial success, is it possible that its run could be extended? Barr answers that I think if DC were to continue past issue 12, Having announced it would be for 12 issues only, it would really be looked upon with disfavor. Also, the book was really, really late in the end, but still well thought of and often reprinted, so no great loss there. But they decided to stick with the 12 issues. They held firm on that so far. I don't think anyone's ever actually tried a Camelot 3000 Part 2, have they? No, I wouldn't put anything past DC. They did do sequels to Watchmen, for goodness sake. It's tough to imagine a book like Camelot 3000 working without Brian Boland's art, but hey, crazier things have happened. If there was another sort of similarly dynamic artist who wanted to do it, or a very detailed sort of artist, if they get Travis Charest on a schedule, I can imagine him doing a book like Camelot 3000, something like that, but it didn't happen, so let's not think about it past that. Here's another feature that Amazing Heroes would often do, where they'd have a multi-part series discussing the entire history of a character. In this case, they're doing Marvel's Captain Marvel. The thing that makes me laugh about this when I think about it is, I see these articles being written, and they're not that long, to be honest. This installment is, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 pages long or so. It goes 2 or 3 parts, and it will include a checklist of every appearance of the character. This was possible back in 1982, because think about it, Spider-Man was only 20 years old at that point, or less, like 19, I guess. It's kind of crazy to think there are only 20 years of modern sort of Marvel superheroes to discuss. DC superheroes were a little bit older, maybe not wanting to do a full Superman history even at that point, because that would still be 30, 40 years worth of history, but with a character like Captain Marvel, he had a chance to narrow it down. I know they did an installment on Nova, and I think they did one on Supergirl or somebody else. I forget who it was. But it's just kind of funny that even at this small print and these 2 columns per page, you could still fit that kind of thing in. Again, it reminds me of something a long-form blogger might want to do, although the blogger would break these paragraphs up a little bit more. The modern reader does not want to read a paragraph that goes on for half a page for 6 inches or so of column space here. We break things up in the modern day a lot more, just so you can skim it, read it more easily, that kind of thing. Amazing Heroes also reprinted the Archie Goodwin Gil Kane Starhawks comic strip for a little while. This is pretty nifty looking. They were also doing the Star Wars comic strips at the time that looked completely different, but Gil Kane's art in this small size, I kind of like it, actually. I kind of dig it. He did good work here in the smaller comic strip size. The review column here includes a review of Camelot 3000 number 1, which includes, I'd be very surprised if Camelot 3000 isn't the recipient of some sort of comics art award. So would I. I don't know if it won any award. I'm not sure what awards were around back then. The Eisners were still a few years away. The Kirby Awards I don't think had started just yet. But I'm sure there was one somewhere that it had to have won. There's some other reviews of Amazing Spider-Man, Comic Art Gallery in New York City. There's a funny ad for one. Here is the letters column now. Here is a letter of interest from this one, and I'll just read it out loud. I feel there is a growing problem among fans who aren't willing to try something new. Many fans won't pick up anything unless it's from Marvel or DC. That's the first paragraph. 1982, folks. Not much has changed over the last 43 years. But let's carry on to see what his examples are, because that's kind of funny. These fans miss a lot of very good things such as Thunder and other things reviewed in that same issue, Destroyer Duck, Charlton Bullseye, and Captain Victory. Just think, what if fans had this attitude 20 years ago? We may never have seen many of the great things to come out of Marvel. There are a lot of good comics out there besides those coming from the big two. I beg my fellow fans to try them. It's a evergreen topic, a good message, one that rings throughout the years, and something feels like we haven't really learned completely from, have we? I mean, it's not entirely true. I mean, these days, obviously, manga is so huge, and Image has been number 3 publisher for a long time, but there is still something to the fact of any comic book that doesn't feature Batman or Superman or Spider-Man on it is a little iffy in the direct market these days. And that's the whole issue. You can see Don Rosa there drawing Little Abner, if you like. And Hugo and Friends. Lots of funny animal comics back in the 80s. Fantagraphics published their fair share. That is Amazing Heroes number 14. Again, August, I believe I said. August 1982. We'll have more issues yet to come. Stay tuned, because boy, do I have a stack of them to go through, and there's some more fun stuff yet to come.